Welcome to the only daily podcast focusing on compliance news of the day. Each morning, start your day with a cup of coffee and Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, to hear about 4 of the top compliance, corruption, or leadership stories you will need to start your day. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
First, a word from our sponsor. The Daily Compliance News for December 3, 2022, the To All Without Regard to Numbers, Wealth, or Rank edition. We begin with that story from the New York Times and its report of the ruling by the 11th Circuit Court, which slammed not only Donald Trump for making specious arguments about why a special master was needed, but also the Trump's apparently personal judge who he filed the lawsuit in front of. It's definitely a win for the U.S. legal system, American democracy, and the rule of law. And the quote I read was pretty stinging, and that is that to create a special exception here would defy our nation's foundational principles that our law applies to all without regard to numbers, wealth, or rank. And that quote came from a 1794 court opinion. Next up, the Globe&Mail reports that South African President Ramaphosa is likely to resign in the wake of the inquiry into the mysterious cash payment. We reported on money theft from his ranch, and now he can't explain where that money came from. He said it was for the sale of cattle, but apparently there was no cattle transferred. So the president who came in to clean up South Africa looks like he maybe cleaned up himself. Next up, from the Guardian, UK banks are failing to comply with anti-corruption and sanctions list. Criminals, including terrorists and tax evaders subject to sanctions, can easily breach regulations, and banks and financial institutions are failing to comply, according to research reported on in The Guardian. The researchers emailed 5,000 banks and 7,000 financial intermediaries and found that there is a, unfortunately, very disappointing lack of following AML and anti-corruption laws and regulations. Next up, we continue with a reporting about SBF. Sam Bankman-Fried himself. This time, he said on a Good Morning America interview that he wasn't even trying to manage risk at FTX. So think about that for a minute. You have a risk management-free business. What happens when you have a risk management-free business and you don't manage it? Well, the risk turns around to bite you in the Watuski, and that's clearly what happened here. It's just unbelievable that the investors who gave him literally millions and sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars for FTX and Alameda refused to look at any of the controls, any financials, any audited financials, or anything other than an Excel spreadsheet. When you have a risk management-free company, nothing good is going to come out of at the end of the day. Have a great weekend. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.